where I talk about. Welcome to the Book Faire Podcast. My name is Anthony, and this week we have an interview with Kam Redlawsk, a look at book bans happening in Utah schools. The rising costs of digital catalogs are causing libraries to end digital services, and a positive update to a censorship story in Georgia regarding a reading competition. Let's start with an interview with author and illustrator Kam Redlawsk. Thank you so much for being here. Can you start us off by just introducing yourself and the work that we'll be discussing today?
So my name is Kam Redlawsk. I'm a Korean-Japanese mixed American adoptee. I'm from Michigan and I live in Los Angeles. I'm a disability advocate, industrial designer, author, and illustrator, and we are meeting to talk about Yumi and Monster, my debut picture book as author and illustrator.
And what is the story of Yumi and Monster?
So it's really inspired by a real-life moment. So I have a very progressive form of muscular dystrophy called GNE myopathy, and it began in my teenage years. And fast forward, I was walking with a cane and leg braces, and I was living in San Francisco at the time, and I had fallen. And in that moment, at the time, I couldn't walk or get up by myself after I'd fallen. So I was waiting for like an hour for someone to come help me. And in that time, I had kind of imagined this furry gray foot pop out from the side of the doorway, and it just snapped in my mind where I was like, he's the reason for all my followers. So, or for all my falls. So that kind of began this idea of like, oh, our struggles, my disability, rare disease. I personified him as this forlorn, cute monster who all he knows to do is to follow me around. And all I know is like, I don't want this guy in my life. What's he doing here? And kind of just goes on about their journey through to acceptance of each other.
And how much of Yumi's story is autobiographical?
Well, it's entirely based on my experience of living. Let's see, I started as my condition or the symptoms began when I was a teenager, and I'm like 46 now. So about 30 years of living with it. And in reality, after I finished it, it's kind of basically the thesis of my experience with this rare disease, specifically the emotional and acceptance journey. So it's entirely based on my experience with this over 30 years.
And so Yumi and Monster is more about the acceptance of your illness?
Yeah, there's a lot of themes, but yeah, in the very beginning when I drew it, it was really about sharing this idea that our struggles or whatever it is, our shadows that are following us, are, if we perceive them as relationships less as adversaries or enemies, then we're able to kind of work with these things that happen in our life or in our lives in order to kind of proceed and live a healthy life. So that's the main crux of it. But there's all sorts of like subtle themes, like the importance of emotions and confronting those emotions and not avoiding them. Kind of like how Yumi was doing in the story when she thought, okay, I'll take the monster into the snowy woods and I'll lose him and done. Everything will be great. He'll no longer be in my life until she realizes this guy is in her life forever and there's no getting rid of it. You have to, work with it and confront of it. So there was the emotion aspect. There was a lot of that type of, interpersonal struggles of how do we deal with those type of things in our life.
And when you were writing and illustrating this story, were there any instances in your childhood upbringing, in your early adult life, that you were able to draw inspiration from? Were there any figures that you were able to look toward for support?
I was from way back then, so there was no social media. There's no idea of like advocates like they do, like they've really grown in the last 5 to 10 years. So there was definitely no advocate or someone to look up to as an example. As far as the book of the story, it is completely and entirely based on my experience of traveling from Yumi is this little girl who loves to run, dance, skip, and play. And I was a soccer player for 13 years, and I was in varsity soccer. And that's when I kind of, my senior year, I had to stop playing because it was pretty obvious there was something going on. And I just couldn't run. I was tripping all the time. Had an unusual gait. So it's really based upon that entire journey. But in reality, I wanted to really write it in a way that everybody could paint their stories onto. It is about disability, but I think any one of us can, pin our own story onto it, whatever shadow that follows us, whether it's, depression, addiction, anxiety, bullying, whatever that may be. So Yeah, it's about me, but I was really thinking about everybody who would read it and how we all are very similar in the way we kind of journey through life with our emotions and acceptance.
And the process of writing and illustrating and then trying to get published can take a long time. When did you first start writing Yumi and Monster?
So I started about 7 years ago. The original illustration that I spoke about, where I fell in San Francisco, and that drawed up the original illustration. I drew that back in 2012, and I'm a self-taught illustrator. So I began illustrating. All of my illustrations and drawings are based off of moments inspired of being adoptee, but mostly my rare progressive muscular dystrophy. And so when I did that illustration of Monster and Me, many people had said you should do a children's book, and I'm like, oh, I'm not a trained illustrator. I've never done a children's book. I write more for adults in terms of like long form writing and sharing more of the intimacies related with an illness like this. So it took a lot to get confidence, but probably about 7 years ago, I was finally like, okay, I should try this because I'm starting to lose my hands and my fingers and I'm not going to be able to draw soon. So 7 years ago, I started doing the concept drawings for the characters. I started with the story first and then the concept drawings of the characters. And then I got an agent when I pitched my manuscript to her and she loved it. I got an agent. And then that's when we started pitching it around. In that time, before I met her and then after, it was about 7 years total of writing and illustrating the entire thing.
Were there any issues with getting it actually published and it hitting the shelves once it was finished?
So there was. So about 6 months after my agent, we were pitching it around, I got a publisher. And so I spent the next year and I finished the book, I believe in December 2023. And there was some oddities with the publisher I had been with. And in January, basically my agent kind of made them confess up that they were going to drop my book because they were dropping my editor and a number of other books and stuff. So that was in general, the publisher experience has been really amazing. I've been so lucky, especially as a debut or first time person. I've been told that's not always the case. So I've been really lucky where my team really believed in me and listened to all my ideas, and they basically said yes to all the type of art I wanted to do. Um, but when that happened, I was like, what am I going to do? My hands are basically, up against the clock. I'm not going to be able to finish and draw the book. So we looked for another publisher. My editor, long story short, she took my book with her to the next publisher, which was a thing I hadn't heard about or known. And that started the new journey with a new publisher. And then, yep, we just released it in September and it worked out, even though it was a little bit of a hiccup. It ended up working about. I'm really happy with my final publisher.
Even though there were a few hiccups, you still see your debut publication process as overall positive?
Oh yeah, I'm so close with my editor and my agent. And like I said, I thought, I'm an industrial designer by training, so I understand about branding and bringing other elements like marketing, engineering, scheduling, and costing, etc., like that type of stuff. So because I was new, I thought pretty much they were going to say no to everything. Like I was told a lot before that my style wasn't going to be accepted by children's picture books. I was also told that they wouldn't accept the black and white. And then when I introduced doing the manga cartoon montage pages to kind of break up the eye and the busyness of the other pages, I thought for sure they would say no because it was like a break and the art style was more graphic and simplified. But yeah, so lucky. I had a really great first publishing experience. Besides that hiccup, which was nerve wracking because now the book came out a year later, but and now I'm not able to sign my own books. I can't even hold a pen. But overall, I think it was worth it. I ended up with a great publisher. So.
And so when you were in the publication process, did you receive any editing notes? Were there any changes that you had to make? And did you have any struggles with adapting those changes as your muscular myopathy got worse?
Yeah, so that's like a two-part question. Like, definitely, I had to adapt myself over the 7 years of writing and illustrating this, especially illustrating. I drew it on a Wacom digital tablet, but my arms were beginning to be affected, my range of motion, my shoulders. So I have had to adapt along my weakness with drawing the book. And so it could have been like, just like bandaging your hand up so it's a little tighter grip around your pen and things like that. So there was that aspect. And then there was also, I'm sorry, I think the other question was notes. So that was another great experience. Possibly because I worked in industrial design where I did consumer electronics and car design, so I know what it's like to work with a team. And illustrating and publishing is no different. It's just different types of parameters. So my editor, again, such a great collaborative experience where she really listened to all I would say, and she would make comments in the beginning like she wanted to add more characters at first, and I was like, it was really important for me to make this just about Yumi, and I really want to make almost like a sense of feeling of isolation and loneliness, because when we're going through our own struggles or whatever, we're really dealing with it internally. We're dealing with ourselves. So it is very much a relationship you're having with yourself. And I didn't want the busyness of other characters. There was other things like adding certain words or lines, and I would send her like a page long email about like why I want that one word not to be added, such as she says she loves Monster, and I wanted to take the word love out because I didn't want the ending to be about this tied up pretty package of toxic positivity. Oh, she once feared the monster, but now she loves him. When it's more about just integrating her and him into his life in a healthy fashion, where she can live her life and they can kind of work together, and less about I love disability. Disability is great. I'm awesome. You know, that kind of messaging that happens a lot with children's book. I wanted to be more of an experiential thing for the reader to really come to that with that final line in the book of going on that journey with her and knowing it themselves rather than being told that, you know, oh, she's awesome, she should accept herself, this and that. When, you know, they just go with her on that journey and see that she accepts it herself.
And that language of the editor wanting to include the phrase "she loves Monster," that kind of and you use the phrase "toxic positivity," which I really find fascinating. And if you want to expound on it a little bit, can you talk a little bit about the nuance of accepting something like an invisible illness, or maybe even a visible illness, something that affects your life so strongly?
So, you know, with the new era of advocacy, which I think is very important, I also advocate on the socio-political about accessibility. These are all very important. What I've noticed in the advocacy realm in the last 5 to 10 years is there's been this fear to talk about the reality of disability, meaning there is an extreme grief stricken process for people. And some people may take years, some people may take decades. And so this feeling of like whenever you go online, and I felt like the messaging was constantly, disability is awesome. I love being disabled. I would choose disability. And that's true for some people. Like there's deaf people who love being deaf. It's a very cultural thing to them. And all we can see is that they're void, or society sees, but they're not. They have a very beautiful language. Or people who are blind, they like being blind. You know, they like that experience that they've had in their life. So I'm not saying that some don't, but you know, I think it's okay to like in this advocacy where we're trying to teach society that we're human, we are able to do all these things. We're not just pitiful, sad people in the corner. You know, don't just exclude us and think that we're not able to do anything. But there's this other also this other realm is that some people are just being diagnosed today. You know, they're never going to see a treatment. They're never to tell someone immediately that they should be positive and happy about it, I think is very unrealistic and a little dishonest. And for me, a lot of my crux of my advocacy over the years has been very vulnerable writing, very honest about the crisis. Obviously, I've lived my life, I've traveled the world, I've skydived, I've done all these things. But there's also this element of, you know, and that comes with acceptance. But there's also this element that you are still going through a difficult thing. For me, mine is progressive, so I'm constantly losing abilities all the time. Like right now, drawing is throughout. So it was really important to me to speak to the person, to the disabled person, but also to any person. Because I think when everyone goes online and you look on social media and everyone's happy, and you see a lot of that with disabled people, and I just didn't want other disabled people or people who are struggling with mental health or chronically ill, like, well, what's my problem? I have a disability. I have, chronic illness, and I'm struggling all the time. And I'm just saying to people, like, I bet you 10 to 1, most people who, present themselves as always empowered and always confident, that's just not reality. And I really wanted to give like that permission to people. Like, it really is important to go through the grief of things. One, it's important for yourself so you can able to truly live your life. Two, it's important for advocacy in general, because the more acceptance you have of yourself, the better advocate you're able to be outside. Um, but yeah, that's what it really was. And I think it's because it's very particular to me with being a progressive condition. I'm constantly going through new stages of grief and loss. And so I have a lot of empathy for that with people. And I didn't want people to feel like there was something wrong with them if they're sad about their disability or illness. It's very natural. So, but the main message I'm telling people is like, that's okay. You should confront those emotions. You should have them, but also like learn to like, how can you still live with it? And the only word that Monster says, he's pretty much nonverbal by design. That was another thing my editor wanted more conversation. And I was like, I really want him to only have the one set of words, come explore with me. Because what I'm saying there is like, when people look at disabled people, all they can see is void. All they can see is everything that we can't do. What I'm saying, and that's the way in general how humans look at life. Something happens in our life, or we look very linear. Oh, I'm not married by this time, or I don't have this kind of job, or I don't have this kind of house. And we view ourselves as like failures and things like that. So I just wanted to say, like, everyone has a different process. And, we don't have to view things so linear. When I became disabled, my doctors told me my life was over and I didn't listen, which is great because I've lived a very, in-depth life. But because I explored my situation, maybe I can't walk, but I can go do this. Maybe I can't draw this way anymore, but now I can illustrate with my finger. I'm practicing how to draw with my finger. So the point of Monster was to say, like, whatever your situation, don't view it as just all one negative. Explore and realize there's always more.
And you said that the monster says, come explore with me. And you talked a lot about the grief process and the acceptance with people with disabilities and advocacy. All of that ties into, and I want to ask, how important is accessibility when it comes to fighting it for advocacy and for the process of people dealing with their illnesses? Because, like you said, with your progressive condition, things are getting worse over time. How important do you see accessibility in society, in schools, for people that are just starting to come to with people who are just starting to come to terms with their own disabilities?
Oh, I would put accessibility at the very top because it seems so inconsequential. But just that experience I told you where my doctor is, which is a form of accessibility, telling me that I'll no longer be able to live a life, they're telling me that my life is over. When become chronically ill, whether it's cancer or they become disabled, all they see is everything around me is going to be stressful to get, me as a wheelchair user. How am I going to get into this store? How am I going to do this? So a lot of people become shut-ins. For myself, I refuse to do that. And that's why I've become a public advocate. And I really wanted to share with people because some people, a lot of disabled people, they've never, oh my gosh, I saw a wheelchair in, Machu Picchu. It's possible for me to travel. And they start thinking to themselves, maybe I can too. And so it's a form of like trying to tell other people, disabled and even non-disabled, that we're not as limited as we are, or, you can live your life. It might just look differently. And accessibility keeps people at arm's length. If I can't be included and contribute to society, not just to be able to go to a store or a movie theater, but be able to contribute and have a job and impart what I know about, what I've learned throughout my life, then we're not able to be truly a part of society. And a lot of people are basically just stuck in their house, sad. And I think that's just, you know, shameful. It shouldn't be allowed. So accessibility is extremely important. Everyone should have basic access to basic things.
And Cam, you mentioned that you initially started with a digital tablet and you would have to bandage your hand to grip the pen, and now you're looking at drawing with just your finger. Can you talk a little bit about where you are now and what you're doing to try and stay creative? And are there any projects that you're hoping to create in the future?
Yeah, so where I am now is I've progressed quite a bit this year. I actually had to make custom signature stamps to do the book signings so they can't hold a pen. But I've been practicing on my iPhone, drawing with just my finger, and I would like to use the rest of the time that I have with my hands to go back to my personal illustrations. Yumi and Monster will most likely be my last children's picture book that I illustrate, although you never know, I might do a finger illustrated picture book. But I definitely have lots of plans to write other ones like adoption, other stories. But I'm an advocate first, and I was a writer for adults first in terms of like how I share about the vulnerabilities and things. So I really see there's a lot of encouragement for me to do a memoir. I have a lot of novel to film ideas. I'm getting into consulting film, and I'm really just understanding how much storytelling has really been a part of me since I was little. I just didn't realize it, or that you could even have a career doing such a thing. So it's just the beginning. So installation art as well. So many plans, so many stories, so many things I'll be working on. So for sure, definitely, it's just not the end, it's the beginning. And this is one of the things with Monster saying explore. It is hard. Like, I used to be a very fervent cook, and I've had to stop cooking. But what I'm telling people is it is hard to lose things. But if you explore, you'll find that you can maybe find another love of something that you like to do. So there is always a way to kind of like find some kind of purpose in your life.
One of the things that the publicist reached out with was there is something in the works with PBS Kids, isn't there?
Oh, yes, I was a consultant for 2 years with PBS Kids on Scalesville. It was launched in the spring of this year. Unfortunately, as you know, with some of the administration stuff, it was cut. The learning grant for it was cut because it had DEI in it. So, as you know, PBS and them have had kids and stuff have having trouble. So my show ended up becoming part of that. So I'm not sure that show is quite canceled yet, but I was working on that for a couple of years.
And lastly, Kam, I like to ask this to all guests on the show. Kam Redlawsk, how do you see yourself and the work that you do as a writer or a writer and an illustrator?
I think just personal and genuine. All of my work, I have a hard time writing or doing anything I don't really feel or care about. So I think everything I've done is about being personable and vulnerability because I've realized, so many people are going through life feeling very alone, whether it's through circumstance or other things. And I've gone through that my whole life as an adoptee, feeling extremely alone. And there's a loneliness theme running through Yumi and Monster. So I think I see my work with Yumi and Monster and going forward is I really want to focus on storytelling that highlights the human condition. I think at the end of the day, I'm a disability advocate, but I think I talk about the human condition, and I think that's what I would like to be known for.
Thank you. That was an interview with Kam Redlawsk. Her book, Yumi and Monster, is available now, and you can learn more about Kam and her work at kamredlawsk.com. Next, we'll be looking at a few notable releases. But first, if you appreciate the work being done on the Book Faire podcast, there are a few ways to show your support. First, you can like, favorite, comment, or follow wherever you are currently listening to help push the show out to new listeners. Second, you can follow the podcast on Blue Sky at Book Faire Pod, or go to patreon.com/thebookfair. On Patreon, you can find episodes posted early, as well as links to news sources used throughout the show. Following on Patreon is completely free. There are no posts hidden behind a paywall, and you can simply add the RSS feed to your preferred podcast listening platform. Finally, the best way to help the Book Faire podcast grow is simply to share it with a friend, an educator, or a young reader in your life. Now, on with the show. Next, we'll be covering new releases, starting with The Firefly Crown by Yxavel, Magno, Diño. The magical ability to control insects determines social standing in this fast-paced, action-packed fantasy adventure by Yxavel, Magno, Diño. 12-year-old Yumi's inability to use magic to compel crickets, like her sorcerer parents, leaves her feeling discouraged and inadequate. When her parents and other sorcerers, known as Mama Barong, are summoned to the palace to witness the Empress's coronation, Yumi stows away on the transport ship, eager to capitalize on her proven affinity for metalwork by befriending a skilled craftsperson in the capital city of Tinanglawan. En route, the vessel is attacked by the Ghost Swarm, a mysterious force of undead bugs. After Yumi blows her cover and, with the help of a cricket, saves the ship from the horde, she's praised for her courage and quick thinking. But when the Empress's Firefly Crown, a magical object used to boost one's ability to impel fireflies, the Empire's only hope of defeating the Ghost Swarm, is stolen, and Yumi is unjustly blamed for the theft of the crown. To clear her name, Yumi must uncover the real thief or risk jeopardizing both the Empire's future and her own. An inventive magic system leaves room for readers' imaginations to run wild, and Yumi's cheeky, self-effacing first-person narrative provides an accessible entry point for considering complex topics such as class differences and personal loyalties. Yumi's mother is described as having pale skin, and this book is recommended for ages 8 to 11. Next is How We Play the Game by Alexis Ned. Rival gamers competing for a chance to make it big in the esports world must team up to achieve their dreams in this playful rom-com by Alexis Ned. 18-year-old Zora is a top player of Wizard Gaming's battle strategy game. Upon learning that the company Wizard is hosting a summer academy, a pseudo boot camp designed to provide participants the tools to kickstart their own professional gaming careers, Zora resolves to attend the program at any cost, including betraying her own battle partner in the arena. Having successfully secured a spot at the academy, Zora is shocked to realize that her former partner Ivan, a washed-up e-boy, facing backlash for his past involvement in toxic gaming culture, has also been admitted to the camp. After Wizard stream viewers dub her an unlikable ice queen, Zora approaches Ivan with a proposal that they fake date each other to repair their foundering reputations. The reality show competition backdrop amplifies meta gaming references, cheeky banter, and Gossip Girl level drama that occurs both on the virtual battlefield and behind the scenes. The result is a streamer-era romance that offers a sharp critique of how influencer personnel and hustle culture can blur the lines between work and play. Ivan is white, Zora is black, and this book is recommended for ages 14 and up. The last book for this week is You Had Me at Hello World by Rona Wang. A Chinese-American teen leaves her small town to enter a high-stakes coding competition across the country, where she grapples with enterprising teens, first love, and the dark side of the seemingly glamorous tech world. 16-year-old Char is tired of dealing with her physically and emotionally abusive stepfather and racist community members in Chinook Shore, Oregon. When she's selected to compete in a prestigious summer hackathon at MIT, Char eagerly accepts the opportunity, which promises $100,000 and consideration for early admissions to MIT for select attendees. But a messy meet-cute with epileptic fellow participant Koi, who is Vietnamese American and encounters with a host of other high-achieving contemporaries, make Char feel out of her depth. Tasked with completing an innovative technological project, Char teams up with Koi and romance blossoms between the pair, even as interpersonal drama seems to haunt every other corner of her life, both at the competition and beyond. Debut author Wang's blunt yet relatable rendering of Char's small-town life makes for an easy-to-root-for protagonist. Throughout the teen's varied conflicts, frank language attentively outlines IRL issues faced by aspiring tech professionals, particularly by people of color, women, and immigrants, as they struggle to enter the contemporary workforce. This book is recommended for ages 12 and up. Now let's finish this week's episode with some news. While some states are beginning to implement protections against book bans, a conservative group in Utah thinks that their policies don't go far enough. Utah is one of the few states that handles book bans on a state level through the Utah State Board of Education. Most states simply hand legislation through censorship and conservative advocacy groups to the State House of Representatives that create broad guidelines about sexual content in schools and create legal loopholes for libraries and schools to jump through. States like Utah choose to take these vague laws to create a list of books that are prohibited in all public schools within the state, regardless of grade level. Recently, the Utah Board of Education has added the 19th title to its list of books that are banned across the state. The newest book banned in Utah is 13 Reasons Why by Jay Asher, the novel that inspired the Netflix series of the same name. This all stems from House Bill 29, which passed in 2024, which set guidelines to ban books on the state level, something that not even Florida and Texas have managed with their own legislation. However, the conservative group Utah Parents United believes that efforts to ban books have not gone far enough. Lawmakers tapped auditors to identify school library books, and Utah Parents United released a 37-page report that flagged what the group calls notable amounts of sexual content that still remains in schools. The report was investigating a list of 22 titles given to them by a concerned legislator, citing the website ratedbooks.org, which is run by a member of Utah Parents United. With the State Board of Education having control over book bans, Utah already has one of the strongest book banning laws in the country. However, Utah Parents United is calling for more strict policies after the audit of titles. The current policies in the state requires books to be challenged before the Board of Education can remove them from schools. And the auditors describe the current guidelines as reactive rather than proactive. They recommend a policy similar to SB 12 in Texas, which goes into the library selection process. Where Utah would differ from Texas is including rules for maintaining classroom and library collections, something the Texas law does not necessarily call for. It's worth noting that Utah's next legislative session starts in January of 2026, so Freedom to Read advocates best be following closely to see if the state will be introducing more book banning bills. Next, a look at the consequences of rising prices for digital services for public libraries. The process of borrowing a book makes it easy to see the utility of offering libraries as a public service. A book is purchased from a supplier, typically at a discount for libraries, or donated by the community, and then it sits on the shelf at a public library branch. Someone with a library card borrows the book, returns it, and a librarian shelves it again to repeat the cycle. However, despite the ease and accessibility of digital titles, maintaining catalogs of ebooks is not as straightforward for libraries. Multiple copies of a physical title can be bought and borrowed until the pages are falling off the spine, giving a book a long and useful life. Ebooks are unfortunately not so easy. A library uses a service, typically one run by Overdrive, and purchases licenses for titles in bulk. Newer titles tend to have specific terms, often giving them a limit to the number of times a title can be lent by a library before the license expires, and must be purchased again. Ebooks also have digital rights attached, meaning that for a library to lend out more than one copy at a time, it must purchase each of those licenses individually. Enoch Pratt Free Library out of Maryland is the latest victim to the compounding costs of digital catalogs. The library district offers multiple digital catalogs through Libby, Canopy, and Comics Plus. However, Hoopla services at Enoch Pratt Free Library has recently been cut due to rising costs. Hoopla offers a solution to wait lists by offering temporary licenses when a book is checked out. After a surge in users of the digital platform, the library was hit with an increase in costs for using the service. The double-edged blade of offering services like Hoopla, as more patrons access the library's digital content, the more the costs increase for the library. While other digital services are available, rising costs are impacting both schools and public libraries for other services. Thankfully, there are people fighting for more fair contracts for libraries. Kyle K. Courtney, a librarian at Harvard, has led an initiative that resulted in Connecticut passing a state law that prohibits libraries purchasing ebooks from services with limits on both time of the license and number of checkouts per license. While the restriction sounds unfair to digital services, it would function the same as buying a physical book. The state law sounds great, but unfortunately, it won't take effect until at least one other state passes a similar law. This is a compromise with conservative legislators that allowed the law to pass, but unfortunately renders the bill useless until other states introduce similar laws. If more states pass these laws, a digital catalog service will lose a large amount of business, as public libraries and schools make up most of their customer base, with private schools and universities also using digital catalogs to a smaller degree. The idea behind these laws is that by placing regulations on the customers for digital catalogs, libraries will be able to negotiate more fair contracts. Hopefully, efforts from Kyle K. Courtney and other librarians will lead to actions that will reduce costs for public libraries to maintain digital catalogs, as well as give them the ability to hold digital content in perpetuity, as opposed to expiring and ownership reverting to the companies under the current model. Next, let's take a look at some good news, starting with an update to a previous story from Banned Books Week. Previously on the Book Faire podcast, we covered a story out of Georgia where the Helen Ruffin Reading Bowl had removed eligible titles from the reading competition. The titles used for the Reading Bowl come from the nominees of the Georgia Peach Book Award, an award that would be chosen in part by students voting for their favorite books. Titles pulled from the Reading Bowl would have fewer students being encouraged to read them and could impact their ability to be given the Georgia Peach Book Award based on complaints from parents and censorship groups across the state. Fortunately, the titles on the list for the Reading Bowl have been restored, thanks to the work of students, librarians, educators, and parents. Within hours of the original story breaking, students reached out to authors through social media, raising the alarm of the book ban happening in Georgia. Authors joined the conversation, bringing attention to the matter and putting more pressure on the organizers of the Helen Ruffin Reading Bowl. A formal statement was issued, acknowledging the actions taken by the Reading Bowl. Book Riot has a wonderful article talking in detail about some of the organizations that helped restore the banned books reading list. These efforts were primarily led by students. And closing this week's episode, Anythink Libraries has introduced an online catalog of banned books that are free to Colorado residents. Anythink is a library service that works across the state of Colorado through multiple library locations, a mobile library, and as well as through community centers and online resources. Last month, Anythink launched their Freedom to Read collection on the Palace Project, a digital content service similar to Libby and Overdrive. Residents of Colorado will be able to access the Freedom to Read collection and create a digital library card completely free. The collection is open to anyone that lives in the state of Colorado, verified by location services while using the Palace Project app. Anythink Libraries joins groups like the Brooklyn Public Library and Books on Band in offering challenged content to people with or without a valid library card. If you live in Colorado, you can learn more about the Freedom to Read collection at anythinklibraries.org. This will conclude another episode of the Book Faire Podcast. If you'd like to learn more about any of the stories covered today, links to news sources are available at patreon.com/thebookfair. Following is free and there are no posts hidden behind a paywall. And of course, if you wish to help the Book Faire podcast grow, the best way is simply to share it with a friend, an educator, or a young reader in your life. Thank you so very much for listening, and as always, I'll talk at you next time.